In an interview last night, Elon Musk made some very big statements. In a very big surprise, he said Tesla will make thousands of bots this year, but then he said 50,000 to 100,000 next year and a tenfold increase to 500,000 bots the following year. We've got several manufacturing and business case experts here with us today. We've got Jeff Lutz, also known as Mr. Incredible, the Rational Bull. We got James from Invest Answers, the Analytical Bull, and Cern Basher, the Bot Bull. These guys are the best in the business here because they've done forecasting. And then you've got Jeff here, who's got experience with the manufacturing and scale. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Herbert. Exciting.
Let's get started by showing the actual clip of Elon last night being interviewed. This is what he said. Let me go ahead and play it.
5 years for my first robot, or
well, for Tesla, our Optimus robot really is it's unless somebody's got something secret we don't know about. Our Optimus robot is the most sophisticated humanoid robot in the world. It's got a hand that has 22 degrees of freedom. It looks and feels like a human hand. We're aiming to have several thousand of those built this year. Initially, we'll test them out at Tesla factories, but then, assuming things go well, we'll 10x that output next year. So we'll aim to do maybe 50 to 100,000 humanoid robots next year, and then 10x it again the following year. It's like 500,000 robots in 3 years. That's a lot.
that is a lot.
Yeah. I was telling you guys, like, well, maybe we should think of this in terms of Roman legions. How many legions of robots will we have? Like a Roman legion is 5,000
So
troops.
when will we have a colony on Mars?
Okay, so obviously the guy goes, okay, let's talk Mars. James, why don't you kick us off? How important was this statement that he made last night? You're on mute.
I think it was important enough to keep me awake most of the night. And I started thinking about, Elon is famous for making the impossible happen, but always being late or a couple of weeks late, a couple of years late, a couple of months late. But I want to set the tone here because a lot of people, at least in my audience, is very concerned about the rapid change in the world that's happening right now. And I've got a couple of slides to set the stage around that so we can because I think that's the big story this week is this bot revolution and how fast it's actually happening, the acceleration of development, how things like AI will surpass human cognitive capabilities in the next 3 years, passing medical exams, all the stuff we've heard, and also a very big piece on how AI has run out of human knowledge and now it's all about synthetic data, which is very pertinent for things like FSD because you cannot calculate edge cases on synthetic data, which I know you guys will go into more as well. The other thing that is really interesting, and I've been thinking about this a lot. I'm watching Elon for 2 decades. Nothing is by chance with this guy. He's always thinking 8 years ahead. So if you look at his hodgepodge of companies, you've got Tesla AI Vision, FSD and neural nets that drive cars, okay, which can be used for robots. Then he has a deep understanding of how the human brain works. He's actually built FSD around how human brain, photons in, actions out works as well. Then you've got Optimus with the potential to be trained on XAI's massive compute. The things that he is building right now, the Colossus, etc., are unfathomable. Microsoft scratching their heads. And then their potential for things like train the trainer. They're already training bots by watching them train others. So the question is, and this will be for you, Jeff, later, how fast can they build these puppies and how many of them? Because it looks like they've already put the structure in place to have the compute necessary to train the trainer. And then we're going to have human conversational skills like X, Twitter. That's the real-time global news feed. Everything in real time. Again, that a human can be in their Tesla in a couple of weeks or a couple of months and say, hey, what's the best taco truck in San Francisco? Or what is the price target of Tesla going to be in 2 or 3 years? Give me a PhD analysis of this, and it'll all come into your car while you're driving or sitting in the back as your office. The future is wild, and I have a lot more to say on this, but right there, I'll just a quick intro, park some of my thoughts before we get deeper into projections and other stuff.
Thank you so much, James. Yeah, it's a much bigger concept. We need to dive into each of those areas that you just mentioned. Yeah, it's pretty exciting. You can sleep last night. I know that Cern didn't either, and Jeff didn't either. We did an immediate live stream last night. Jeff had to do it to explain the details. So why don't we go with you, Cern? Let's start with your explanation of what you're thinking and your calculations of forecast.
Sure. Yeah, that's a quick response to what James said, though. I think what we're seeing is the start of a massive increase in intelligence on the planet. First of all, it's coming from compute, right? We're massively increasing the amount of compute in the world. And Elon, you could look at it cynically and say, well, Tesla's going to put humans out of work. Sure, humanoid robots have the potential to do that once they become highly capable. On the other hand, Elon is helping to improve compute intelligence within humans with Neuralink. Eventually, we may all choose to put a Neuralink in our brain to make our brains operate more effectively, efficiently, more powerfully. So that's kind of a big picture thinking longer term. But just in terms of the numbers, Herbert, if you could throw up those charts. So this was, I labeled this my original ramp. Actually, this wasn't my original one. My original one was about half of this. And then back in the summer, there was an exchange between Elon and somebody on X, and I revised my numbers to these numbers. And so I had Tesla making 1,000 humanoid robots this year, 1,000 Optimus, and then 10xing that to 100,000 in 2026, and then 10xing that to 1 million in 2027. Now, based on what Elon said last night, that is the upper bound of the numbers that he mentioned last night. Mm-hmm. And here's the lower bound, which was a few thousand this year, 4,000 this year, which was higher than the 1,000 that I originally had, but 4,000 this year, and then 50,000 in 2026, which was about half of what I had. But it was within the range that Elon gave last night of 50 to 100,000. And then he suggested 10xing that to 500. He didn't say 500 to 1 million, but 10xing the 50 would get you to 500,000. And then if you follow the 10x again, that would be about 5 million. And I've just continued this on with my original projections. And so, you know, these numbers are starting to frame up a little bit. Now, on one hand, this seems like a lot of robots, right? 500,000 robots seems like a lot. But when you think about a robot is about a Tesla Optimus robot is about 3% of the weight of a Model 3. That uses about 3% of the batteries. So for, you know, if Tesla is producing vehicles at scale, it's not that difficult for them to produce millions and millions of robots at a similar scale. So for example, 50,000 robots would be about 1,600 to 1,700 vehicles. And that was Elon's number for 2026. And so that's not a huge number to go from 0 to 1,600 to 1,700 robots a year. And then his number for the following year at 500,000 is only 16,000 to 17,000 robots. And so I actually think that Elon is actually giving us extremely low numbers here. Right? And the numbers actually could easily be much, much higher just because it's going to be far easier to build robots at scale than it is to build vehicles.
Yeah. I'd love Jeff to double tap into that because, you know, we know how hard it is to build 2 million cars and how many gigafactories you need. And I get the 3% thing, but talk to us about, I've heard you talk a lot about the parallels between cell phones and robots and how you can scale these things.
Yeah. So yeah, the announcements last night to me made it very real that the plan to build 5,000 to 10,000 means you've kicked off your tooling to build your first production lines, even though they may not be fully commissioned as a production line. Those are lines that can probably eventually just transfer into production. And you've also told your suppliers to kick off, production grade tools. You're out of the kind of the softer tooling phase. So for me, from a phases perspective, what's happened is we're beyond the handshake phase between the Franz team and then the engineering team that's enabling the product and the supply chain team. We're beyond that initial handshake of like, how are we going to package this thing together? what are the major features. To me, the 22 degrees of freedom hand and the integration of that into the forearm was that final point. And since then, they've basically they've built up some software tooling, done some more validation, and then I believe now they've kicked off a set of production tools, and that's very meaningful in the development process because you can actually carry those production tools into production. You may end up modifying them several times, and some of them you may decommission. But the point is from there you go to N+1, and and you go beyond in terms of replicating tooling. And between where we are right now and the end, so we probably don't have final designs on many parts, but what we have is the ability to go through the engineering phases of development. And there's a couple of phases of that occur over a series of months. And then at some point you get to the last couple of phases, and those last two phases are around device verification and then pilot or final validation of the product. And in those two phases, you've gone from transitioning all off of any kind of prototype tooling or non-production process. You've transitioned now to production processes, but they're not at their full rated speed. And they're even as a single line, they're not at their full rated speed. But that's what those last two phases are. You're working out those bugs, and now the kind of changes you're doing to design, instead of them being multiple weeks and months to get done, they're much shorter in time duration, and they're much less complexity and less risk. So I think there will be surprises along the way. I think as they get this thing to literally the final thing, the thing that they're actually going to send purchase orders out to suppliers, they build it with this exact database, with these exact parts, there's going to be some surprises along the way. But what I took from Elon's signal last night, again, there's signal and noise. What I took from it is that we are in the final throes of getting to that. And it may be plus or minus 3 months or 4 months, but we're basically in the final throes. There isn't some thing of like, we're not going to build humanoids for another couple of years. It's plus or minus to me a couple of months. And that to me is separating signal and noise. I see a lot of the commentary on X around, Elon time. It's going to be a couple of years out. No, this you have to be able to separate what is being said at various points in time. And to me, we're within a couple of months. Final comments on the complexity side of it. Yeah, you can look at it from a raw material perspective as well, and battery size, and those are all valid things that Cern went through, and I appreciate those. One of the first things you look at with a product like this is, in terms of manufacturing complexity, you look at the volumetric density of the product. That is, what is the physical volume of the product, and how are the components packaged inside of that from a density perspective. For example, when you're building a set-top cable box that's this big, the volumetric density is very low, and it's very easy to build products like that. You should be able to build them with very high reliability. You should have no problem. But now all of a sudden, when you're building a smartwatch that's got a cellular radio, that's got Bluetooth Wi-Fi, that has a screen, that has a speaker, that has microphones, now your volumetric density goes all the way to the other side, and those are actually much more complex to build. And the way I would view Optimus is, it's greater than a smartphone and tablet in terms of complexity. Now, the density goes down a bit because you've got a lot of room in that chest cavity, but you don't have a tremendous amount of room. But where the real complexity comes in, it takes it to me, beyond a smartphone tablet in terms of complexity, is obviously the mechanical portions of it, and probably some to do with the raw materials in terms of how they're going to get the weight. So that to me is where there's going to be some interesting questions about, okay, as this actuator ramp goes, how well is it going? How well are these suppliers able to hold these tolerances? How difficult was it to get that hand that was shown at We Robot, or the one that was shown in the demo? How many pieces were thrown over people's shoulder to get to that yield, to get that hand? To me, that's the question. Now, very good engineering teams figure these tolerances out, and they figure these things out well in advance. Tesla is a very good engineering team. It doesn't mean that there won't be, further risk, down tier. This is some of the things you encounter with Cybertruck and getting that thing to production. But in terms of complexity, high volumetric density, higher than, building a vehicle, but not as much as a smartphone, but way more mechanical complexity involved. But I do think the ramp plan that was discussed, I do think it's achievable, and I do believe that there's going to be a lot of focus on this from the Tesla team.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Folks, you guys have to understand, Jeff actually was responsible for global manufacturing of mobile phones, global distribution, launch, QA, everything. And a number of the CEOs I've interviewed in the robotics world, CEOs of humanoid robot companies, they've all kind of agreed that a robot, humanoid robot's closer to the mobile phone than it is to a vehicle. You talked a little bit about how confident Elon is. I wanted to play another clip from that interview where he talks about saying that he thinks that we have the most sophisticated robot that's out there. Just a quick listen to his video here.
And when can I get a home robot? Okay.
Right. Well, so that's the other element, is our humanoid robots. So I think probably most people, if not everyone, would like to have their own personal C-3PO R2-D2. And I actually think humanoid robots will be the biggest product ever in history by far.
I agree.
Yeah, it's just wild, because you can just say, well, every human is going to want one, most likely, and some will want two, and then there'll be all of industry in terms of providing products and services. So that you have to say, what's the ratio of humanoid robots to humans? My guess is it's at least 3 to 1, 4 to 1, maybe 5 to 1. So we're talking about 20, 30 billion humanoid robots. It's not even clear what money means at that point, or if there's any meaningful cap on the economy. I think at that point, assuming that things haven't gone awry, in the good AI scenario, I think we won't have universal basic income. We'll have universal high income.
So do you think 5 years for my first robot, or?
Well, for Tesla, our Optimus robot really is, it's unless somebody's got something secret we don't know about, our Optimus robot is the most sophisticated humanoid robot in the world.
Okay, I just wanted to, I know I played that clip a little bit already earlier, but most sophisticated humanoid robot in the world. Anybody here want to comment on that clip?
Well, I mean, I'll just say quickly, that is a distinguishing feature. That is an investment. When you're building a product up, you want to break down, you know this, Herbert, because you're a practitioner of this in a former life, but you want to do the feature value trade-off of everything you're putting in the product, and understand, is the COGS investment going to, is it table stakes? Is it a safety thing? Is it table stakes? But also, if it is, is it going to have payoff? And I think that decision around the hand added tremendous complexity to the product and tremendous risk. But what I think it does, and the way Elon kind of eloquently said, is it basically can do everything a human hand is. And a light turned on for me when Tesla announced that they were doing that. Because in my mind, from designing factories before and with my teams and looking at the decisions of what we do with manual labor and what we do with automated labor, you really have to understand the size of components, the ability, to grip things and to manipulate them on the line, something called Z-axis assembly, and just designing for that. And when you have a bot now that has the hand that has much, much broader capability, I think broader than what we've seen out there from any other humanoid, that opens up the possibility and allows you to put the bot in more slots and more situations everywhere in the product. Because what you've seen traditionally from humanoids is them picking up a 2x4 or picking up a flat panel for a sheet metal that goes into a vehicle, or picking up a box. But now all of a sudden, when you see them manipulating a component in their hand, or a cable, or a cable insertion, it becomes a much different conversation. So I think what Tesla did, by making that COGS investment, by making that engineering investment, by taking that risk, they surmise that feature value trade-off is going to pay off. And I believe it is as well. I think they would have been in production, quite frankly, a little bit sooner. But regardless, I think the AI and the hardware are going to be a little bit more aligned now, and I think it's a meaningful change in what Tesla did.
Yeah, James.
Yeah, there's so much that was released yesterday. My head went directly to another area, and that was what he said, way beyond bots too, but more around the intelligence and the combined human intelligence. But one of the things that really took me aback before we get more into bots, is I have a lot of thoughts on that too, was that self-driving will exceed human safety in Q2 2025.
Wow.
That was absolutely
in
bonkers.
3 months.
Yeah.
3 months.
12 weeks. And again, relying on vision only. And then 10 to 100x safer than humans, reaching near zero crash probabilities. And I've been in situations where I was driving from LA to San Francisco, but I took the country road and a deer popped out in front of my car, and it was at dusk. I didn't see the deer at all. The Cybertruck did. So something about the vision is very special. It can take in more photons, etc. And he wouldn't say this stuff without, knowing the data, which they have, and they can forecast it in future releases. So, but the big story today, I think what we'll cover pretty soon, is FSD unto itself is huge. It's a multi-trillion-dollar business, and they have the insurmountable lead, but it's tiny compared to the bot opportunity. So that's just what I wanted to plant here for now. Over to you, Cern.
Yeah, Herbert, if you could maybe throw up the chart of the scale potential for bots. So last night Elon talked about the potential for 2, 3, 4 times the bot population in the world versus humans. And I'd done some work on this previously, and it's shown in this chart here. This is from back in the summer. At 1 times the human population, let's say it's 8.1 billion bots, right? And feel free to change the numbers to whatever suits you when you look at this table. But for that category, 8 billion bots in the world, I assume bots working 20 hours a day, 350 days a week. So it's 7,000 hours of work. And let's say that costs $350 an hour. So that would be revenue of 24,500. This is to Tesla. This is to any other bot maker that has a similar opportunity, right? And let's say they get the production cost down to 10,000 and so on. You can amortize the cost of that over 10 years. There's maintenance costs, there's other operating costs. So the gross profit per bot in that scenario is about $17,000, right? And then you scale it up to 8 billion, you get to almost $200 trillion of revenue, right? Subtract operating costs, subtract taxes, you're at net profit of 100 trillion for the industry, 50% margins. And if you just use a ridiculously low PE of 30, you're at 4 quadrillion, not 4 trillion, 4 quadrillion market cap for the industry. Such is the nature of scale in this business. Okay, so let's say my numbers are wrong by half. Okay, so you're at 2 quadrillion, right? And then let's go out to the right side of this chart, 2x, 3x, 4x human population. Of course, at that kind of scale, the cost would come way down, both to make the bot and the revenue, right? So let's say it's $2 an hour. That's $14,000 a year in revenue per bot. Let's say it costs $5,000 to make, right? You're looking at an annual gross profit of about $10,000 per bot, right? Which is quite a bit less than the first scenario we talked about. But at 32 billion bots in service, and again, this is just on Earth. This is not including bots, on the moon or on Mars or wherever else in the solar system we want to place them. You're looking at about a 10 quadrillion market cap opportunity just at a PE of 30. And this is why Elon says, what's money at this point, right? It starts to kind of break our notion of economics when you have a form of labor that is so massive and potentially so cheap. And maybe these bots will work, for 50 cents an hour, right? Okay, fine, right? It's not a 10 quadrillion dollar opportunity. Maybe it's a quarter of that. So it's just staggering when you run the numbers out any period of time. So, it's interesting and it's exciting to think about the production of the bots for the next couple of years and where Tesla might be. But I get really excited when I think about where this industry could be in a decade or so from now.
What do you think is
Quadrillion. That's the first time I've been in a meeting where we talked in quadrillions.
Yeah.
that was the industry. What is your expectation for what Tesla's take will be?
Well, I think that remains to be seen. I do expect that this will be a very competitive industry. Now, not everybody will be competing at Tesla's level. Tesla clearly is going to have a robot that is more advanced than most other robot makers. But over time, I would expect very, very strong competition from the Chinese robot makers, and they're noted there in red. So about half of the robot makers that I track are from China. And I'm adding more to this list constantly. Now, when you look at the videos of the Chinese robots, most of them are seen, walking. They're being shoved. They're focused more on movement than what they can do with their hands, right? And while movement of a robot is important, the real value of any form of labor is in what you can do with your hands. Most humans, in a factory don't have to run around. They don't have to get off the floor without using their hands. It's really what you can do with your hands. And that's where Tesla has focused. So I think they'll be more focused on the higher value added work and therefore, greater revenue and profit opportunity. They won't be in that mass market area where you've just got robots doing basic chores. But the robot market should be massive enough. There should be room for plenty of players. And I also think that there's some US-based companies too that are well positioned.
Well, let me ask that question to you, Jeff, then, okay? So you've got a lot of competitors. Never underestimate how great, especially the Chinese manufacturers are. But if Tesla is producing 50,000 bots next year, which company, which Chinese or otherwise, is going to create 50,000 bots next year, 500,000 bots the following year, 2 million, like that the following year? And what would happen if you carry this forward, right? So let's say 3 years from now, let's say one of these other companies is able to make 100,000. What I mean? Because it's a 10x improvement every year, it matters. It's a 10x. And by the way, every CEO of every humanoid bot company I've interviewed, and I asked them, what is your projection for how many bots there will be, how many you'll create? They all agreed that it's a 10x. If I make 1,000 this year, it'll be 10,000 next year, 100,000, and so forth. But you know what I mean? Like, it's such an exponential scale growth that the manufacturing is so critical. Jeff, who can do this, and how is it gonna capture? What's the world gonna look like in 5 years from now?
Yeah, what Tesla is building, I would say, at the complexity of the Tesla bot, very few, if any, maybe none in the beginning. But what I think is what Tesla is going after is do the most difficult thing on the hardware, do the superset from the hardware side, work on the superset from the AI side. And then when there are opportunities presented that say, look, you don't need that dexterity in the hand, or you don't need that speed, or you don't need, XYZ, then they could potentially produce robots of differing complexity. Or they could actually, I don't want to get too wonky, but they could actually use the yield fallout from the actuators that don't work with the 22, that don't meet their current requirements from a tolerance perspective, and maybe those could produce bots that what you're seeing from some of the Chinese and others. I'm not saying, by the way, that like there won't be a Chinese company that eventually, or Korean company that can do that hand eventually. It's just going to be a series of time. And I think the combination of the hardware capability, the manufacturing capability of Tesla, and then the AI brain capability, like when I view it in a truth table form, or like, again, I go back to digital logic and an AND gate. In an AND gate, you need all the inputs to be true for the output to be true. And in this case, you want the output to be a functioning humanoid robot with AI, expansive AI capability that could scale and train and do everything. If that's the output you want, for the inputs, you need the brain, you need the engineering, design, and capability of the bot, and then you need the manufacturing capability. And it's not clear to me that there's another company that has all three at the level and capability of Tesla. But what is clear that there will be other companies that will produce bots. But I think the whole thing about like the competition is coming theme here, I don't think we have to have that conversation, quite frankly, for a number of years, maybe many years, because the TAM is so, this this TAM is going to be so large that there's going to be room for many people to compete. And I know there's a little bit of a conversation about how do you price this thing in the beginning, and it's going to be a function of several variables. Like what is the process time and yield to get that hand produced? I think the cost or the cogs around the early Optimus robots for that first year, they're going to be quite large until they get to the scale of a 1 million unit type run rate. The cogs are going to be, much higher, and that's going to be part of dictating the pricing. But the market pricing is going to be dictated by the capability of other bots out there, and what people are willing to pay. And Cern went through a bit of that top end of that model of what these actually replace. I actually think it goes well beyond labor. By the way, I think it goes into non-labor activities. It goes into traditional areas where companies are buying fixed capex today. So, but yeah, I think I think getting back to your original comment around, ramp and around what, are others going to be able to do this? Yes, eventually time offset and, differing levels of complexity. And remember the truth table, remember the AND gate, AI brain, manufacturing, engineering capability, and those two together in one company right now are very rare.
Mm-hmm. James?
Yeah, I've got a couple more thoughts on the bot before we get to kind of other news too. A couple of quick slides. One, and it goes back to, again, Jeff's knowledge of production and manufacturing. Can they do it? Will winner take most? Yes, that's the way the world works. So I do believe the manufacturing prowess and all of the component parts that Tesla has is absolutely unassailable by other players. And but how fast will it come? That's the question. What will they start doing? And when you look at the way in which AI has progressed since November 2022 to today, basically 2 years, it's unbelievable. Can bots do the same thing? I actually believe so. So I've got a couple of slides on a couple of just random thoughts, things I've been giving a lot of thought to. Is not just this, the economic shift, what's going to happen to humans, but I'm trying to map out the future of humans. Where will they go next? And how much impact could these type of bots have on the world? Obviously, the amount of work that they can do when they first come and do work, it'll be very basic work, but still they'll be able to work much more hours, 20 hours a day plus, and have much more productivity, even though it's a crude task. And then what happens in terms of global compensation? What happens in high quality manufacturing processes? What happens to low and medium skilled workers around the world? What happens to people offshore? Like we saw a lot of chatter last week about low wage countries and H-1Bs. And somebody said, I can't remember who, but they're not really required anymore, or they work out of wherever they are in the first place. And then the maintenance and everything else. But thinking about this is how can people position themselves in the future? Because that's been my absolute obsession for the last 6 months. How can people prepare for this job displacement? And then it leads me to think about new AI job creation. And on this next slide too, that's the kind of the ugly side. But on the good side, the impact of macro, the good things that can happen is, Elon talks about it sometimes, the absolute abundance in the world, the growth in GDP. Like even if GDP grows by 10% annually, that is insanely wealth building for the world. But where, again, like who will be the leader in bots? Where will the wealth concentration be held? That's why I urge people to start buying some Tesla, because I think it's going to be the leader in this space. And then other challenges, promises, etc. And that leads me to this. Now, I did a bit of crude modeling this morning on Elon's Optimus update, and I took his projections and I have them and I delayed them by a year. And the numbers get really, really nutty. Like I've claimed many times that the megapack business is worth $1 trillion. Well, when you look at FSD or cars, it is nothing compared to green. And I deleted the 2031 onwards numbers because they get completely crazy. But even taking what Elon said, cutting his numbers in half and delaying it by a year, cutting his numbers in 2/3, even delaying it by a year, the numbers go absolutely bonkers. It's not even fair to even show this. So the question that we all have to answer is, it will be worth trillions. Will it be worth 10 trillion, 30 trillion? We're not sure, but that's just some of the thoughts I'm thinking about. And none of this work is complete, but I am concerned about the future and how people can position themselves carefully to take advantage of this revolution, because you don't want to be caught on the back foot when all of this radical change is coming, and it's coming fast, really fast.
That was amazing. Mic drop. Thank you, James. That is to put everything in context. I want to bring back the conversation about how important this is to the world, to countries. And so, don't you guys, like, what would happen with China? China will need to support Elon and Tesla. They need Tesla. They like some people are going, oh no, this is so critical that China's going to shut them out and kick them out. No, because whoever wins in the bot is going to be very critical for both economic warfare and military warfare.
Yeah, and it all ties into all of the perfect storm happening at the same time, not just the AI revolution, but also the decline in birth rate, elderly population, aging population, all that type of stuff. And the Chinese, actually, I admire them because they think very much like Elon Musk. They think 8 years ahead. Look what they do with precious soils, or whatever they were called, 10, 15 years ago. They were buying up all the supplies in Africa and other places because they knew the importance of batteries. And then the EV revolution, everything else. The Chinese are not to be underestimated. And Cern's chart with half of the robot manufacturers being Chinese, that tells you how focused they are. The US is not focused. The US government has not invested in bots. In fact, they've spurned Elon Musk and bots. But hopefully a clever administration will realize this is the way you grow GDP in the future. You embrace it or you die, you get left behind. It'll also level the entire playing field across nations, whether they are emerging economies or Western nations or established. Like a place like Germany, they are in desperate need of bots to get out of their hole, for example. Anyway, just some random thoughts.
Yeah, just to extend on that a little bit, look at what prior civilizations did with low-cost labor. Now, it might have happened to be slave labor, but still, the point is that low-cost labor allows you to do absolutely anything you put your mind to. Now, maybe the pyramids aren't, the most useful thing in the world, right? You're building big grave sites or whatever, but still, look at what they accomplished. And even today, I think we still struggle to figure out how they did it. And if we tried to build a pyramid today, how much would it cost? Right? So if we drive down the cost of labor and use it for more productive things, we can truly have a level of abundance in this world that we can only dream of. Now, we get down to the practical challenges of how actually we make that work, right? Are the shareholders of Tesla going to enjoy 100% of the fruits of that? I doubt it. What I think actually will happen is that, like we're seeing with the Cybercab, Tesla recognizes how massive this opportunity is, and they're giving people the ability to own Cybercabs. Tesla doesn't have to do that. They could easily make these vehicles and keep them for themselves. And I think the same will be true of the humanoid robot. They will give people and other companies the ability to own them and purchase them and deploy them in their own fleets and make money from them.
Guys, why is Tesla doing this? I keep scratching my head, right? So if you were Tesla and you're building Cybercabs, it's to your benefit to just own it, because the cost of the asset is so low, you amortize it and you just do leasing and renting, and you can get the most out of it instead of sharing it with somebody. And two, the bot. You've heard Elon say, we're going to both sell it and lease it. It only just makes sense to me as a businessman to just lease it and never need to sell it, because the cost is so low again that it doesn't make sense why you need to have somebody own the whole thing and buy it. Why do you guys think they're doing this?
It's all due to the master plan. It's always been the master plan to accelerate the world to a more sustainable future and make it multiplanetary. So he's not there out of greed. He's out there out of helping the world, I think. And it's all laid out for years and years, 8 years ago in Master Plan Part 1. It's actually even longer. That was 2006, wasn't it? Nearly 20 years ago. So.
If you have one company that owns the world's transportation system, if you have one company that owns all the humanoid robots or a large portion of them, that makes them a massive target for whoever. But if you share that wealth with individuals, with other businesses, now suddenly you are a very powerful force, and one that it's very hard to attack politically, because now there's millions of people that benefit from the ecosystem that you've created. Right? It's a bit like companies on Amazon being able to sell their products on Amazon. It's not just Amazon that's eaten the retail world. There's retailers now that sell on Amazon, and so that makes them far harder, I think, from a political standpoint, to go after. And it'll be the same thing with Tesla, with Cybercabs and the humanoid bots.
Exactly. Democratize everything.
Yeah. And there's more than enough money for Tesla, and there's more than enough money for everybody else. Just look at the numbers that we've shared. Even if Tesla only gets a small portion of that, it's incredible. It's massive for the shareholders of the company.
The biggest pushback I read last night, and I'm still reading today, is they go, Elon, yeah, he says all these numbers. Good luck. We'd be happy to see 5 bots this year. And I'm like, they already did 40, but okay. But you know what I mean? What's your answer, guys, to this concept of it's just Elon talking big numbers all over again? He said there was going to be 1 million Cybercabs in 2020.
I'll push back to Jeff on that one. That's in his wheelhouse. But I've never heard him speak with such conviction as last night. He wasn't futzing around. He had a very specific plan of numbers.
He did say if everything goes well.
Yeah.
He has to, because there's like I said, there's uncertainty. There's uncertainty ahead. And I also think this is going to be a difficult thing to model too, is just kind of the geopolitical uncertainty around the acceptance of humanoid labor replacing labor. Are countries going to put taxes on these things to kind of have some sort of sliding scale to introduce them so there's not this huge, I don't know how to model something like this, but I think the probability is greater than 0 that there's going to be regulations that governments are going to want to get a piece of this action. Just, so it'd be interesting to see how that all plays out. All the more reason to have Elon closest to the most powerful office in the world. Again, 3 things need proper regulation. 1 is AI. 2 is autonomy and vehicular autonomy. And 3 are humanoids and the introduction of humanoids into the workforce. And I think over this next 4-year period, the one of the most productive things that he can do is help introduce that and have it work from a legislative perspective, and have it make sure it does the right things from a safety perspective, but also does the right things from a productivity perspective. So it's not overly regulated, but it's properly regulated. So I think that's one of the most important reasons. I think people get confused about, I don't like when he comments on this and that, or why is he so close to this person or that person? If it weren't the case, I would actually be concerned about the introduction of vehicular autonomy and humanoid robots actually ever even happening, or happening on time, or not being bizarrely taxed or something along those lines. But in terms of the confidence, all I would say around the confidence question, and I said this last night too, you have to separate signal and noise. You can't be just in one camp of like, I believe everything that Elon says down to the hour. You can't be in the other camp that says, well, everything's been late and therefore this is going to be late. Because, like, for example, the Model Y was not late. And it's the biggest product they've ever done. So what you have to look at is you have to look at the variables in front of you, and you have to separate signal and noise. And what my takeaway is when you're signaling the 5,000 to 10,000 units this year, what that means to me is that's the end of your prototyping cycle, and those are production worthy units that are built from the end of that cycle, and that they're scaling up, and then that just goes into a soft launch into production. And so to be able to do that later this year, you're setting things up now. You've made decisions, you've locked things down, you've put things into motion to enable that. That's the only way you could say something like that and be so definitive. But my recommendation for people is to have a goalpost approach and just think in terms of like, well, it's not going to be absolutely on time, but is it plus or minus 3 to 6 months? Does that really mean anything to your time horizon of owning the stock if you're interested, or following the company if you're interested? I think no, because I think we're in that kind of 3 to 6 month window, whether it's the autonomy conversation in Q2 or whether it's the the production availability of bots in Tesla factories, I think you're in that window now based on his comments.
If Tesla started to produce the robots in Q4 of this year, and let's say they wanted to make 5,000 of them, that's only 55 per day. It doesn't seem like a big leap for a company like Tesla to make 55 robots a day in the fourth quarter.
Yeah. What they'll typically do is for if this is the end of the, I don't know if they're going to declare start of production or not at some point, but if it's the last two phases, in those last two phases, you typically could do 10,000 units. This is what happens in the smartphone world because you're trying to get units out to operators. You're trying to get units in all your final safety testing. So there's a lot of places that units go that you just don't see in these videos. That's the other thing people need to keep in mind. For every Optimus you see catching a tennis ball or walking around the factory, they've got 10 more of them in a reliability lab being sprayed with water jets, going through hyperextension testing on the joints and so forth. There's a lot of units that are being built for that. So if the fact that they're going to make 5 to 10,000 available for the factory, they could do that out of the last two phases prior to start of production, because in those last two phases you should have produced a production line and the parts should be coming off of production tools. And so those things should be running at a rate in the 25% of production rate kind of level, maybe a little bit higher. And that's enough to produce these thousands of units. So yeah, to me, it's very realistic to do this. It's to me a question about are all the major problems solved so that these things can be safely, in a Tesla factory. And they're going to give themselves, by the way, I think the fact that they're going to deploy them in their own factory, they're going to give themselves a lot of leeway on that. And this happens, by the way, in other industries too. When you're taking a chance of are you going in? You're going to do the more expansive and the larger builds. You think about where the units are going, and if you're going to be able to if you're going to consume them because you're working on some large application internally, you tend to take more risk and just pull the trigger and let them go. When they're going out to people that are not inside of your four walls in your company and they're paying real money for them, then your level of risk, your risk tolerance goes lower. But yeah, there'll be all kinds of things they'll do. By the way, I think this is going to set off a frenzy of people that want to get into line and want to be in that first wave of bots that are outside of Tesla. I think this starts to set off that wave. And this is where it gets a little bit back to the pricing conversation. What are those people going to be willing to pay? Because you have to look at it from a layering perspective. If your goal is you have factories and you have millions of employees and you want to start replacing them, you want to get that first, just like you're doing a factory ramp to build product, you're going to need to do a workforce ramp up that's going to occur in layers. So the earlier you're in with a smaller quantity, you would pay a lot of money for that smaller quantity to be in those early studies to give yourself the opportunity for the larger ramp later on. So I actually think that there may be given the value of these bots as Cern described it, I think there'll be a little bit of a frenzy to be I want to be first outside of Tesla to do this.
1,000%.
So, he said 5,000 bots, thousands of bots this year. Okay, they're going to be in Tesla's factories. But when they do 50,000 or 100,000 next year, where are those bots going to go, Jeff? Right? They're not going to just all go to Tesla. Maybe Tesla suppliers, but right? Aren't we going to start hearing partnerships and customers announced
yes.
by next year?
Yeah.
Maybe even this year.
Yeah. And if I'm Tesla, I want them going to SpaceX. I want them going to Starlink. I want them going, and I want them going to my suppliers too. And because I have contractual relationships with all of them, if I'm Tesla, and I have indemnification, I have the contractual setup and framework already with those partners, so that if there are problems, we can deal with them because I've got leverage with them in many other areas. So if I'm Tesla, that's how the spider web goes. It starts in my factories. And by the way, it starts in the outer perimeter of the factory and it moves in as the ability and capability of the bots improves. It moves further to the inside of the factory is where more of the more complex operations occur. You think of the outer perimeter of the factory, if you're kind of in a helicopter looking down, that's where boxes of material come in The boxes of materials are they're sorted on shelves. They're pulled from shelves. They're inventoried. The boxes are opened. You're doing optical, maybe mechanical inspection on them. That's the inbound of the factory, and then you're putting these things onto a material movement process to get them out to the line. The other place you would put them is you would put them in quality assurance, and you would put them in the outer edges of the factory, whether it's boxing up product or whether it's doing final optical inspection on things. That's where I would start the bots, and then you would move them in over time.
That's what I'm saying. But 5,000. Okay, what's his name? Tom Jew once said that when they built the gig in Mexico, imagine if 5,000 bots were working at Optimuses were working at Gig in Mexico. What do you do with 5,000 bots, right? I mean, there's only so many pick and place. They must feel so confident that these bots can do many different kinds of tasks in order for them to say, I'm going to do 50,000 bots, 100,000 bots. You know what I mean? Like, it's in order to do that, you need to have multiple tasks, not just multiple partners.
I don't know how to explain this more clearly. I don't know of another company whose proficiency in designing factories and designing the individual manufacturing steps in a factory and the knowledge that's encapsulated inside of doing that is designing and building bots. There's very few of those companies that have the very high volume manufacturing scale experience that are actually designing bots. It's actually very few. I don't know how to describe it more clearly, but Tesla's going to have a set of knowledge around what a workstation is, what are the rates, what do they start at when a person starts on a line, when they're a new trainee, when it's the start of a brand new line, what are they at nominal rate, what are they at peak rate, how long does it take to get to those rates? And there's a level of analytics that Tesla will have, and that what we do as practitioners in the industry, we try to figure out from a design for manufacturability perspective how to minimize those process times and how to balance each station so that there is a continuous flow of product and there's no gaps in between. I don't know of another manufacturer of bots that has this kind of capability. So while they ship them internally into Tesla, the inputs to their design process and the way that they're going to be able to test them, they're going to have an unbelievable data set because of just their knowledge of how to design manufacturing steps and processes. So it can be a number of things, Herbert. It can be a lot of things. They could, right. I mean, I can think of a number of things they can do, but that 22 degrees of freedom decision, to me, opened the door for them to do many other things in the factory. And I think it turned the conversation from what can't the bot do to it turned the decision from what can the bot do to what few things they cannot do.
Yeah. Let's end with this. So Jensen Huang, CEO of NVIDIA, was doing a presentation at the keynote speech this Monday, and he showed this slide here, and he said this, right? That, in the past, perception AI was the big thing, right? Speech recognition, medical imaging. Now what we're at right now is generative AI, right? You got your LLMs, you got your content creation, be able to make movies, be able to have answers. But actually the big things that are more important is agentic AI and physical AI. Agentic AI is when the AI gets smart enough that it can actually do actions. It can actually, navigate through software, so to websites, and do things for you. But physical AI is the holy grail. That's where things really are going to be the most valuable, the most return on investment. And the two is self-driving cars and general robotics. And those are the two that Tesla's leading in. Even Jensen Huang himself said so. James, can you explain this and tell us more about how you interpreted this slide? James, are you in mute?
I actually shared this a couple of days ago because I thought it was very profound. And the funny thing about it is the way the chart looks, it appears like it's into the future, but this stuff is already here now today. The agents, there is now talk of, from the McKinsey report last week, there's thoughts of a whole enterprise being completely replaced with 3 layers of agents that literally replace a lot of white collar functionality today. And physical AI, like I kicked off at the very beginning, we are there with self-driving cars, if Elon is correct, in the next 12 weeks, which is bonkers. And then 10x to 100x safer than human by the end of the year. That's it. That's physical AI. And then the other thing as well, to double tap into some of the stuff that Jeff said, I think is often overseen, is not just spinning up these robots, but the ability for them to all learn tasks simultaneously. The value of that is insane. You don't have to train employees. You know, with the neural net thing and AI and Colossus, once one robot learns one task, the whole fleet does. And that's insane. And I've one, before we wrap as well, I just want to drop this little thing, because this is a question that people have. This slide, if you could pop it up, Herbert, for a second. And this is the society. What is the impact of all this? We've covered a lot of stuff today, and I know it's a lot for people to absorb. But you can see Twitter X, the importance of that I laid out in the very beginning of the plan of how Elon is thinking, reportedly implement a new feature for Grok AI to write users' captions on posts. Basically, you don't even have to go to Twitter anymore. It'll do it all for you. And then Leah says, we as a society are doomed, and in 2 to 3 years, we'll have AI bots doing everything for us while our brains will keep on getting fried. I hate Elon Musk. So this is an interesting post here, because it incorporates Elon haters, Elon lovers, AI, future society. I'd like the panel here to comment on this real fast before we move on.
Well, there's no doubt that society is going to go through a massive change. This technology is here, whether we like it or not. It's here, and we're just going to have to find a way to adjust to it, like we have with every single other technology that's come our way throughout humanity. Unfortunately, this one's happening faster probably than we can process it. I think that for the 4 of us who are focused on this every day, it's hard enough for us to keep up to this stuff.
Yeah.
Let alone the average person on the street who's maybe not really that aware of what's going on. But it's going to hit them pretty fast.
I have 2 quick. Oh, sorry, Herbert. You please go first.
Yeah. I had a very long and deep conversation with my wife on this last night. It's a topic that keeps coming up, and I don't think that they're wrong, right? It is something to be concerned about, what's the future of humanity, that it's going to be lumpy before we head to the utopian world that we're hoping will happen because of low-cost production of these robots, and that maybe the AI can be supportive and helpful. Even Elon himself says right now, I think it's a 50-50 chance. 50% chance it's going to be a positive outcome, and 50% is going to be terribly negative. But what's going to happen to humanity? I don't know. It's going to be bad, but then before it gets really good. And my only answer to that is, you can't stop it, right? There's all the, if it wasn't Elon doing this, it's not like there's many competitors doing it. It's many companies. All the Mag 7 are doing it. So I don't think you should blame Elon, but you want a company like Tesla to be the leader, to either balance it out. So if that it's spread, that power spread, but also my thinking is that if I can't beat them, I better be part of it, and that's why I listen to this. I participate in all this. I want to shape it, and I want to invest in it, because what happens in the future, this is the future. So
yeah, I'll end it with is I was kind of one of the last generations in consumer electronics of a manufacturing engineer that actually worked in a factory. And then in the early 2000s, we had globalization and we moved manufacturing out to China and other parts of Asia. And I participated in that. And then towards the end of that curve, I brought manufacturing, a lot of it, back to the United States. And from what the proficiencies and capability, whether it's tooling or manufacturing and assembly, and just the operators, the technicians, the engineering capability of when we had it here to when we brought it back, were night and day. Our manufacturing base was mostly hollowed out. And so I view this as, from a national security perspective, if we don't do this and do it well, it's going to be done in other countries and other geographies, and they're going to dominate. And and they may do it. They may have a different twist to how they do it, and it may be even worse for us. So I think you want Tesla doing this, back to Herbert's point. And I'll leave it at that. One other just quick nugget I want to leave for people. I said this briefly last night, and I put a post. This is going to have, and I don't know how to actually value it per se, but the fact that this thing is going into production has to be creating the most unbelievable feeding frenzy right now in the supply base for automobiles and for people building humanoids. And for Tesla, what you would want to create is the greatest superset possible between automobiles and humanoids to play this off of each other. I don't know how this is going to actually play out, but there is a concept of forward leverage. Even one of the VPs of manufacturing in Tesla supply chain talked about it, because it's something we do in the industry. I don't know how to value it, but for this year, I just have to think that there's this feeding frenzy of, if you're not on the bot, what do I need? I'm Tesla. I'm an auto supplier. How do I get myself onto the bot? What do I need to do for you today on the 3, the Y, the Cybertruck, the Cybercab? What do I have to do? I don't want to lose a bunch of money, but I will lose some for a period of time if I have to. I will give you whatever kind of cost reductions, whatever kind of contractual benefits needed. How do I get onto the thing that may be the greatest, volume? This is one of the reasons, by the way, that Elon is putting this out there and putting this information of like what the total available market of this is going to be, is he's setting up the rest of other industries so that they can A, be there to support it, but B, be there to compete for it. And he's positioning himself in the product. Listen to what he says, is this is the most advanced product. We are going to engineer it, get it into production. You want to be in line, whether you're TSMC and you're at the top of that supplier food chain, or you're making adhesives at another point. You're going to do whatever you can to get an award on this product. And all I'm saying is it may have a nonlinear impact on Tesla's COGS today. It's hard to measure. It's difficult to measure. I'm not saying they're going to lose money indefinitely, but I think there's going to be some implications. It'll be interesting to watch.
In fact, Jeff, the TSMC was the thing I wanted to mention as well. Have they completely locked out the supply chain for bots, etc.? It sounds like
Elon is having those conversations with the general managers and COOs at the TSMC and Samsung level. Yeah, he's having those conversations, and those are the 2 to 4 year conversations. And what Tesla has to give them now is what's the 2-year forecast for AI5, and then what's the tactical forecast for AI5. AI5 will go into unless it's delayed for some reason. That will go into production this calendar year. And I just, the way that all this is shaking out, both Elon politically, where EVs are going and where he's positioning things from an autonomy perspective, if you're a supplier, you don't want to undersupply an Elon company. If you have to do allocation, when he knocks on the door, he's knocking on the door not only on behalf of Tesla, he's knocking on the door on behalf of XAI. He's knocking on the door on behalf of SpaceX. And I think it puts Tesla in a unique position. It doesn't mean that they don't have to do all the hard work and there's not risk. It's hard to put a value on this, but there's tremendous leverage created.
And Jeff, will AI5 be the brain of both? Be the same brain for both Optimus and FSD?
Yeah,
and that is huge. And then, of course, quick follower will be AI6, and then on and on and on. So
I believe they will dual source. So it will be in multiple. I believe the AI5 chip will be in multiple fabs geographically. This will be a new thing. Remember, what will the world look like a couple years from now? We don't know. But you would not want all these things produced in Taiwan. You would want the ability to have production in the U.S. I believe that will spin up at least in 2027 for TSMC, earlier for Samsung in Austin. I believe they will actually dual source AI5, but I believe there will be a lead partner and a lead supplier. But I believe this may be one where they actually dual source it, and there will be multiple fabs geographically, because that's going to align with how they're going to build Optimus in multiple factories geographically as well. You would not want to build an Optimus in somewhere in Asia and be getting, components from US per se and vice versa.
Just to take you back to something that Jeff said earlier about the demand for bots. So put yourself in the seat of the CEO of Walmart.
Mm-hmm.
You've got 2.3 million employees worldwide. You've got annual turnover of 40%. Your HR department has to hire 1 million people every year just to replace the ones that are leaving your company. If you replace 1% of your workforce with humanoid bots, based on some quick numbers that I've run, that's about a 3% increase to your earnings. 10% of your workforce with bots is about a 30% bump to earnings. If you replace 30% of your workforce with bots, again, that's less than 1 year's turnover, you've doubled your earnings, not revenue, earnings. So if you are the CEO of Walmart, might it not behoove you to give Elon a call and say, hey, can I be your first customer? But then the CEO of Target should be thinking exactly the same thing, because if Walmart gets the bots and they don't, then suddenly now they're at a competitive disadvantage, because Walmart could increase their earnings by 100%, but they could also cut prices and further hurt their competition. So this kind of dynamic should play out in every single business that could benefit from bots. All the companies that go head to head, you want to be first. So, I talked about this actually about a year ago, and maybe we're now at that point where Elon's saying, hey, we're going to start making these things. You want to be first in line, and you better make sure you get your allocation. It's like what Jeff is talking about with these chips. You want to get your allocation of Tesla's humanoid bots, because you're going to find yourself at a massive competitive disadvantage very quickly.
Yeah. They won't have to reduce pricing for a long period of time. And that early pricing is going to be very high because it's going to be market driven. It's not going to be like Tesla's like, I'm trying to get the world to sustainable labor and production. They are, but there's going to be a supply. There's going to be a macroeconomic supply demand thing, and the demand's going to be large. And there will be a foundation series bot probably. There will be these things in the beginning where, I think the price point's going to be very high. Tesla's is not going to have a problem making money on this. And it's not going to be, it's going to be many years before it's a 30,000 thing, in my opinion.
Yep.
Kim Kardashian will have one first.
Please not. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys. Thank everybody. Please follow and, this is a great panel. We got James, right? We call him the analytical bull. He's the GOAT. He's both strategic and he's very analytical. You've got Cern Basher. He's got forecast. We've been working on robots for a couple of years now. And by the way, a lot of his forecast has been dead on. We've gotten confirmation from the CEOs of some humanoid bot companies that some of his cost analysis, some of his thinking about the future was exactly what they were thinking. And now he actually laid out exactly what you just heard Elon say, the same forecast there. And then you got Jeff Lutz, one of the few individuals here who's actually done manufacturing at global scale for, in his case, mobile phones. But like we said earlier, the bots are closer to the phones than they are the next, as this rolls out in the next several months and years. These guys are going to be the ones that are going to guide us through and understanding how things are working. Fantastic panel. Thanks, everybody. Follow everybody. Jeff should be the most followed person on X. Get there. Follow him at the Jeff Lutz.
Lots of people.
You. See you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.